All right, welcome to December 2nd edition of Kubernetes Public Steering Committee meeting. We have a light agenda today, but if anybody's on the line and has an item that they'd like to bring up, discuss, please feel free to add it to the agenda. Oh, cool, and Tim's on. So now we have 5. And Steve, why don't you kick things off for us and talk to us about the topic that you're.
Okay, so I've had a proposal submitted to create a user group for people using Kubernetes on top of VMware infrastructure. I think there is something in the community structure that labels itself a user group, but I think this is the very first one that's going on under the procedure that was put in place when the cloud providers got folded underneath the cloud provider SIG. And I think I've met the requirements for creating this. It said to go get a couple charter members, put through PRs to get the thing entered under the community structure, put in a PR to get a Slack channel, YouTube, and all of that's been done, and I think it's all been approved, and it actually appears there is a user group, except the meeting times aren't filled out. But I wanted to get a charter in place, and technically the procedure currently documented doesn't even require a charter, but having been a co-chair and a leader of a working group, I think I'd like to have a charter, and perhaps it's just an oversight that the charter isn't required. I certainly can't see any harm in that. So I created a PR with a proposed charter, and that's linked in the meeting notes for the steering committee today. I think that I'm not sure what the actual requirement is on that charter, but I'm assuming that a vote by a quorum of the steering committee would be the way that this is done. So that's the way the old original VMware SIG happened about 1.5 years ago. So I put that in there. The charter is modeled on the charter you'd have for a SIG or a working group. And if the steering committee wants me to, I'm willing to do another PR to actually change the SIG working group lifecycle doc to say that a charter is required. I know that there is potentially one other user group, somebody who was formerly a leader of the Amazon or AWS SIG, said that they wanted to create a user group as well, but they were going to watch how the process went with this and follow in my footsteps. So getting this documented might be a good idea. Any questions?
I have comments. So given history, there was not a requirement put in the original document that I think Phil had worked on for user groups, because we wanted to lower the barrier for entry, because it was just a user group. So we figured so long as it met the criteria listed down there, it was fine. I don't have strong opinions either way. I do think that so long as it met the requirements that were originally laid out in the document, that seems fine to me. I don't know what other people think.
Yeah, I don't think it's a requirement either right now. I'm okay with it not being a requirement. We can do charter later once the group gets its feet.
Okay. Do you have any objection to doing one anyway, even if it isn't a requirement?
I have no objection so long as you don't own code. That's
okay.
The only
yeah, it flat out says that it doesn't own code, so I think I'm good there.
Yeah, I don't have any objections either.
A question for maybe Dims or Tim, because I think this was in the last iteration of the steering committee. So it looks like the PR that initially formed the user group was put in September. I actually don't see steering committee sign off for it. Did steering talk about a VMware user group? Did we approve it? Is there a requirement for that as a step in the process? That seems unclear.
No, we talked. The steering previously talked about the formation of user groups specifically related to the cloud provider issue. So we wanted to collapse cloud providers, but we wanted to have a venue by which, people who had wanted to do Q&A. It's basically like user support and user community stuff, to have a venue. But we wanted to make sure it was crystal clear that development was within the main project, and that because what we also saw too. And this is not me, it's a royal we, where this is the feedback I got from the cloud provider folks, was that a lot of these individual meetings would be almost like user support groups. They weren't necessarily always focused on development. They'd be asking questions in Q&A. So part of steering's feedback, part of the things that we did was to create that organizational structure. We did not give any blessings, yay or nay, for any specific group. We only created the requirements for what it meant to create a user group. And I'm using the royal we in a lot of sense. I was involved, but I think Philip did most of the work, the heavy lifting there. I think with help from Nikita. So.
Yeah, on top of that, here, I'll put a link in the chat, but the actual procedure says, I'll read it to you, but it says it needs 2 sponsors from steering, but says that there will be lazy consensus in the event of no objection within 7 weekdays. So I think the documented procedure doesn't actually require a vote on the formation of the user group as it's stated now. Here, I'll put a link in the chat to that section.
We don't typically vote on stuff where we have lazy consensus specifically called out.
I guess my only comment is, reading your charter, you could get almost all of this accomplished by adding an office hours to the SIG. I feel like
I'm going to hard neck on that. I'm going to hard neck on that because the original structure was created specifically to prevent SIGs from becoming office hours or becoming a user group. So that was part of the problem, and part of the solution for user groups was to prevent developers from getting inundated during SIG meetings, specifically cloud providers, during their regular scheduled meeting times. Because that's the reason for the structure. The structure has the organizational structure for the groups, the way was laid out was done that way on purpose. Everything had a rhyme or a reason. I don't know if we actually put logic in there or not. I don't think we did. Aaron and Dims can keep us honest. I wish we kind of put a little bit of history behind why it was there, and that's probably our fault.
Right, and the other thing here is, if we do office hours, then office hours would be for all the cloud providers, not just specific to specific providers, right? So we did need an escape clause for AWS or VMware or some other providers, because they used to be SIGs, full-fledged SIGs.
Yeah, let me add a little color here too, because I took the liberty at KubeCon San Diego of actually hosting a lunch face-to-face with, it only had our 2 charter members, which are people from Walmart and T-Mobile. But what happened was that those 2 users ended up going way over, chatting with each other about common problems and helping each other for 2.5 hours. And I think that if this was to go under the cloud provider SIG, it would be more a series of users asking for support from the developers, whereas I envision this user group actually evolving into something of a large group of users, perhaps helping each other, coming up with sets of common problems, feature requests to present to Kubernetes developers, but largely a self-sustaining user-to-user discussion group.
Yeah, Kendall is here.
Sorry, go ahead.
Kendall is here. She knows how we did the operator stuff in OpenStack, and how different companies who are using technology would help each other out. So yes, I would definitely think that model we should start doing that here in the user groups.
I guess we should expect every cloud provider to have a user group now.
Not automatically, right? Only if there is people to actually do the work and do what is necessary. We don't want to just mint user groups if there's nothing backing it, if there's no one coming to the meetings, if there's nothing happening there and there is no self-organization, there is no point having a group in name.
Yeah, I think that you need somebody like any SIG. It actually requires a fair number of hours to get the meetings, to organize an agenda so that people join the Zoom and actually find something interesting when they join in. I'm not sure, certainly any cloud provider could try to organize that. And I aspire someday to perhaps the users carrying on this without any vendor operation at all. But I think to get this bootstrapped, it's going to require some work to get this to the point where there's a critical mass so that users can self-elect leadership and take this over on their own.
So I want to jump in here quickly for a second, trying to keep us on track. So we didn't actually choose a bosun at the start of the meeting. At Paris has volunteered for note taker. I'll volunteer for bosun unless anybody has any objections, just to keep us on track.
+1.
Okay, so there's an existing procedure for user groups now. It looks like that procedure, like I haven't gone through the checklist and verified, but like it sounds like most of the steps in that checklist have been done. Is there an issue somewhere? I'll direct this question towards Steve. Is there an issue somewhere that's tracking all of those bits? Or is it just like the PR to like the initial draft PR that I found here? I'll toss it in the chat. It's like this initial PR to like create a user group, which it doesn't look like there's a ton of discussion on. And then there was the PR for the charter.
Right. And there is some, I don't know that it's a PR, but there was some documented procedure for getting the Slack channel and Zoom credentials. And I followed those, but I don't think they were technically PRs. But I was told that they'd be approved pending the charter approval. But I think that everything on the real list has actually happened, except for this charter that appears to be optional. However, the people running the Slack channel and some of the others said they won't. I think they got used to the procedure for working groups and SIGs and just expected this to be similar. So I was told that the things would proceed when the charter got approved. I'm not aware of anything else I need to do. I think I've followed the documented procedure and that all the steps have actually, save for charter approval, which might not even be a requirement, I think they've all gone through.
Okay. What I would ask, like this is like a new thing for all of us, because yeah, looking at our user groups, like other than VMware, there was big data, but look, big data was a conversion from a SIG. So like this procedure, as far as standing up a new one, it looks like is brand new, and we're walking through it. What I would maybe suggest to make sure that we've like clearly checked all the boxes, is it possible to open up an issue against K community and basically take that checklist and run through like, yes, I did this, here's where it is. Yes, I did this, here's where it is. So we have kind of like a documented trail of like, here's where we went through each step in the procedure. And we could also link back to that if we have takeaways of like, this worked smoothly, this didn't. Here's where we can clarify and like link back to follow-ups of, hey, here's where we're going to improve the procedure. I think that would be helpful. How does the rest of steering feel about that, as far as like at least a next step in documenting what's already been done?
Can we separate out two things here? One is what do we have to do for the specific request from Stephen. And the other one, if Stephen has some cycles, is to help us make the documented process better as a two separate things. Can we do that, please?
I'm okay with that.
Stephen, does that sound
Yeah, I can
okay?
do that.
Okay. Are you signing up for both things, Stephen?
Well, I'll open the issue on documenting what I think the steps are and the process I went through, their status. Just to, I don't know what the outcome of the requested outcome of the issue should be, but yes, I can log what I think the requirements are as I interpret them and how the process went for me.
Yes.
Is
And
that
so,
sufficient?
like Christoph said, have that checklist there, check boxes. These are the different steps. All these are done, and then we will, then the steering will basically chime in there and do the lazy consensus and merge it.
Okay, and then for the other one, which I think is the charter approval, I don't know what else I could do on that one. The PR is open, and I don't think I have anything else to add unless somebody's asking me to add something. So as far as I'm
Right.
concerned, the next step is either approve it or tell me that it's not needed or desired, in which case we can just close it.
You've already done the work there, Stephen. So, but people haven't probably read it yet. So let's defer that as a separate thing for later. I just want to make sure that you get started with the approval without the charter, and then we can approve the charter later.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should definitely like document all the steps first of like what the actual, okay, so the procedure says we need to do all these steps, document where we've done all of those steps. And if they're already missing, making sure that we call those out as like, okay, these smaller steps still need to be done for the working group as a whole. And then yes, once we get that done, then I'd like to revisit the charter. And like echoing what's been said earlier, if it's not a requirement to have a charter, but the user group wants to have a charter to like define some things clearly, I don't have any objections to that. And I think that's something reasonable for steering to at least review. Like if you're going to have a charter, I think steering should review it. But I don't necessarily think it's required if our current guidelines say that it isn't.
Right. And the other thing to remember, Stephen, is for the next coming group, we are going to point them to your issue and say, go do what Stephen did. So basically, that's the way you should look at it. How can we make sure it's easier for the next person?
Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that might be beneficial for our own history is to outline some of the motivations and ideas behind it. So if you are PRing the main doc, we might want to add some other language inside of there to make sure it's clear why we created this structure in the first place, because it's missing some history. So you can assign me to that one. I can do that.
I will just briefly add the little context that I know Andrew Saikim and Nishi put together the initial proposal for how to merge all of the cloud provider SIGs into SIG Cloud Provider. And the creation of user groups was considered part of that process. I linked an issue in chat that talks about converting all the cloud provider SIGs to working groups. I think that's incorrect. I think they should be converted to user groups, and maybe Steve is taking the charge on that. I looked back at the steering mailing list, and it seems like what I would have preferred to see was a notification that the user group was getting created. Instead, what I saw was a notification that you had a charter. I feel like if you have a charter, you need to go through the mechanics of calling for a vote.
I put in that notice that it was being created, but what happened was that at that time, unless I was a member of the steering committee, that email documented, I guess I can put this in the issue, but it bounces. and I didn't know how to fix that.
I see something from you on October 16th, but I just didn't see like the explicit call for a vote. And I sympathize with this because I blazed this trail of going above and beyond when I put together the charter for the Kate's Infra working group. And the major pushback that I got was that this makes it look too much like a SIG. And the only concern with user groups, as Tim was alluding to earlier, is like, we do not want this to appear as though it is the officially project blessed way of running Kubernetes on VMware. You know,
Right.
Ask yourself, why is it that you're doing this here as opposed to someplace that VMware has a lot more branding and control, perhaps? But this definitely, like, user groups for every cloud provider was part of the original plan. I can't find the proposal that Nishi and Andrew put together, but I know it's linked somewhere in our meeting notes.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion on it in the face-to-face that maybe didn't get fully recorded, and unless it's in video form from that meeting. But, we went into this at the cloud provider face-to-face in Barcelona.
So
you know what to do next, Stephen? And
I think I understand what to do next, yes. I'll create that issue logging the steps and my experience with them, and allow people to review the PR that lists the proposed charter.
and we start the clock on the lazy consensus as soon as you're done.
Right. And with regard, I think people have...
Can I make a request on that specific item? Like the clock for lazy consensus or something like that should start with an email to steering, which I can also jump in and make a comment like the reason that you weren't able to email steering and your email bounced, that was a technical, unintended technical glitch. Steering at Kubernetes.io is a public emailing list. You don't need to have membership to email to it. We do get some spam, but it was actually a technical glitch in the Google group moderation settings that was preventing folks from emailing to it for an undetermined period of time. It's definitely fixed and tested, and anyone can email. Anybody that can hear my voice can email steering Kubernetes.io. It's totally okay. So we should, any clock for lazy consensus should start with email, not anything on GitHub.
Agreed.
Yeah, right. I think it is resolved now. It's just that as an explanation for why you couldn't find a record of the email, I did attempt to send it. It's just that in the era I sent it, it was unable to go through.
Okay, so I'll put out any a request. Any final comments from steering in particular on this? Any questions you have for Steve? Okay, great. It looks like we have some action items from that. Any last comments before we move on from this topic?
Just apologies for it being Byzantine.
Okay, thanks, Steve. It doesn't look like we have anything else in our topics section of our agenda. So I'll put out an open call. Is there anything that anyone else would like to bring up and have steering discuss at this time?
So this is Dims. I was just curious to see if there were any follow-ups that came after the public meeting in KubeCon. Was there any hallway conversations or anything that people started after we met in the public setting there?
I didn't get anything specific. I did have some conversations with people about like how to, contact steering if they have specific issues that they'd like to raise. I did send an email when Nancy had put out a thing like, requesting feedback from the session. I did email her asking for if there was any feedback from our session that was put in through the app, but I haven't got a response from her yet.
Got it. Thank you. Oh, the other one that I wanted to ask was Michelle Nurali is our representative to the CNCF governance, right? So was there any feedback from the GB meeting face-to-face there that we know of? Sounds like a no.
Should we?
Yeah, I haven't.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Christoph.
Go ahead first. I was just gonna say I haven't heard anything.
Oh, no, yeah, and I was just gonna say, should we ask Michelle to come on like whatever the next public meeting is after they have a GB meeting? I see a thumbs up from Tim. Okay.
Yes, please. That would be good. So we can do a follow-up brain dump from Michelle and then see if there is things that we need to follow up back on whatever was discussed there. Will you be following up, Paris?
Yep, taking that as an action. Sorry, I was violently typing.
Thanks, Paris.
All good.
Okay. Last call. Is there anything that anybody would like to bring up and discuss today? Otherwise, we will call it early.
Well, we are here. I had talked privately with Dan, and I had mentioned it to steering, but I think it's worthwhile to talk about it with the community. Is that for a part of the long-standing things that I've had working on steering is to prevent the tragedy of the commons. And that's part of what the organizational structure was meant to be about. But there's also this other question that we've had is that it's not glorious for folks in the community to do the awful grunt work that people have avoided for a long time, or the technical debt. So we wanted to have, the question is, do you provide, for policies, do you provide a carrot or a stick? And immediately for a long time, I've always gone with the stick approach. But in conversing with Dan, he came up with a clever idea of potentially having incentivized means by which, if we can create or generate a policy that allows folks who do the hard work to get a keynote slot at a KubeCon. I thought this was a great idea. What I'm interested in is if other people are interested in helping me to craft said policy. I do need to open up an issue against the steering repo, or if you have initial thoughts or questions, complaints, concerns, feel free to raise them now.
I think that, like, as a direction goes, I think it's a very interesting conversation to have. I definitely agree with the idea of trying to find incentives to get like corporate backed sponsorship of dealing with technical debt and other like unglamorous work that doesn't get shipped as a feature. I definitely think it needs like conversations and exploration of like, are there any other would there be like unintended consequences of something like that if we offer like in particular like keynote slot as a carrot, and how we could potentially mitigate some of those unintended risks or unintended consequences rather of using that as a carrot. But I do like the idea of rewarding, like what incentives can we reward like companies and organizations beyond just individuals for doing that unglamorous work. And I'm interested in that discussion, and I can definitely like help review. I don't, in the next little bit, I don't know how much time I'll have to like co-author something, but I would definitely like to help review something.
You sounded that whole lead up. You had a little clause at the end. That whole lead up was like, all right, I got a partner in crime. And then like escape valve.
I could definitely try. Like if you're taking the initial torch on this, Tim, I can put in some cycles to try and help you out with them.
Okay.
Because I'm very interested in this conversation of like, how do we get rewards and incentives that benefit both individuals and companies for doing that unglamorous work.
Yeah, and I know that like we can tie this in with other efforts that are ongoing in the community underneath SIGARCH for like having the tech debt backlog. So we can have a ways by which we can measure the amount of debt that gets done or gets, you know, completed or whatnot.
So what sticks do you feel have been ineffective?
Well, we didn't have any sticks. The question is for a policy, you know, we haven't really crafted a policy on this. We've been too busy with other stuff. But I this last KubeCon, it was one of my things of like, you know, if I leave my indelible mark on the community, what would it be? It's that the community is sustaining, right, over a longer period of time. And one of the key things that I see in every community that basically has a large number of companies contributing to it is that sometimes these larger projects implode with their own technical debt because of, and refactoring and everything else, basically the unglamorous work that no one gets, you know, the companies are not innately incentivized to wanting to contribute resources towards. Is the question then came is like, we don't have an enforcement policy. And we don't have a policy. The question is whether or not to have an enforcement through CNCF or to have like an incentive structure. And in my mind, every time I've tried to talk about enforcement, it's kind of, people kind of bristle at it. But incentivizing, having an incentive structure sounds intriguing.
Right. So Tim, I'm your partner in crime in this. So there is a issues 41 in Kubernetes steering. It's called crafting policy on requesting help for key areas. So the idea there is how do we have a body of things that we can point people to saying, look, we've documented this. We need help in so many things, you know, you got to help us. And if you help us, then here is the carrot and here is this, you know, whatever, right? So there is a doc there. Mitesh and Damini are working on it. So I will try to bring this up in the next steering meeting, and I'll give a heads up before, so you all get a chance to read the Google Doc. The idea of Keynote definitely is a good thing to consider here, you know, and we should try to come up with more ideas like that.
That was a super long-winded answer across two people. Did it kind of answer your question, Aaron?
I think so. Like Christoph said, I think this is a useful conversation to have. The only other model I can think that this is analogous to is that of a bug bounty sort of deal. And I think we have just so much rich gold to mine that I don't think we need to worry about I'm going to code me up a minivan sort of situation. This is certainly worth exploring. I think it starts to get tricky when we talk about like, well, how much Keynote, how many people, what's the bar, that sort of stuff. Like I still feel like there's going to have to be some level of enforcement at the end of the day, but we have, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure we've had CNCF's help with a bug bounty. So this might be a useful extension of that.
Yeah, so bug bounty is going to go live early next year. I don't have a full readout. We should probably ping Brandon to invite Brandon as well for that. But yeah, that's definitely going to come in Q1.
Okay. Yeah, I continue to be optimistic or hopeful that we can find some way to use the community's release process to find a way to, enforce what goes in and what needs to wait a little bit. It's another opportunity to build consensus, but I think this is an interesting avenue worth exploring.
Okay, last call on this particular topic. Anybody have any other comments on? Okay, so we're back to last call for any new topics. Anything else that we would like to bring up and discuss in front of everyone? No. Going once.
I'll have things in January. I'm still KubeCon burnt out.
And Aaron, welcome back.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I will probably also have things in January. Noodling on a couple ideas, but I don't feel the need to take up our time right now.
Yeah, so happy to see you back, Aaron.
It's great to be back.
I'll take this opportunity to highlight, towards the steering members. So in 2 weeks, we are supposed to have on December 16th, our private meeting for the month. Do we still want to have that? Are people going to be around for that, or are folks going to be starting holidays early? I will start in saying like I will be there. I don't have any specific topics for it, but I would plan to be there in 2 weeks.
I think we should take a pulse as we get closer. I should be there as well, and we don't have to really take any decisions, so we can just talk. Worst case.
Okay. It looks like we have enough folks that are saying like they'll be around to like at least discuss. So we'll at least keep it on the calendar. It's not a flat like let's cancel it now. So that sounds good. Seeing that there is no more topics, I think we'll call it a meeting. Thank you everyone for showing up. And the next public meeting will be, I guess, January the 6th at the same time slot.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers. Later.
Thank you. Bye.